we were there, it was a 10-day deal. Eric and Lawrence and I rented a car, and we drove back because there was the rest of Iceland that we wanted to see. Because classically what people do is there's a highway that goes around the edge here. And some people that are really adventurous go around the whole thing. And up here in this area, in the Trolls, this is where you really kind of get the tourists go. So if you want to ski and go to a resort or something like that, go, anything other than backcountry, you're gonna be up in this area.
Do you need a four-wheel for that, to go up and down?
Yes, everything is highly recommended four-wheel, and stay on the main roads unless you've got gas cans. It is very, very interesting out there. So as we were driving out, of course, the mayor, these guys know everybody in this town, in Iceland. We stopped at a few places, like a farm, so I had to stop at passport control and tell them I went to a farm, which was fun. But that was pretty cool. Icelandic ponies, they don't let any horses in Iceland to keep the Icelandic pony bloodline pure. Very sort of interesting thing. So at that point, the group that we had kind of been hanging out with and climbing with kind of went our separate ways. And Eric, Lawrence, and I started driving, and most of the other folks, got back, they flew back to Reykjavik. We had people from Denver, a couple people from Switzerland, Paul, these three folks were from Switzerland. So, usual international crowd. And then along the way, we started stopping and looking at some of the glaciers and, just doing some standard hiking and sightseeing that was just unbelievable. And it was waterfall overflow. I saw so many waterfalls, I stopped counting. It was like, oh, a little waterfall, take a picture. Oh, another waterfall, take a picture, right? After a couple hundred of them, we're like, I'm waterfalled out.
It's so dramatic, though. If that was in New York, it would be such a big deal.
Yeah.
Yet there's zillions, it looks like.
It just doesn't stop. The waterfalls just keep coming. It's just, there's no end to them. The beaches are black sand.
Volcanic, right?
Yeah. And it's just, the colors aren't really, you can't really see the color set, but it's blue. It's just as blue, as deep blue as you can imagine. It's like the inside of the ice is just glowing with this blue neon. You can see the seals swimming around. There's our little guy. This is one of the glaciers. So as you're driving along that southern highway, we stayed at a small hotel, and you just grab your gear and you just go out to the glacier, and you can go for like a 30-mile hike along the glacier, and that's what you do in the morning, and then you get breakfast, and it's just like it's like 10. Iceland was like 10 trips in one. So again, at some point you kind of get, it's like Buddha burnout in Asia. You're like, all right, once you see like 20 Buddhas, you're like, that's awesome, but I'm no longer going to pray. But one thing that was pretty cool was the ice sculptures that washed up on the beach. So what happens is the ice, as it would sort of break off and start to melt, it would create different sculptures that are very unique. And each one of them, any one of them, you could literally sort of pick up and put on the mantle of your fireplace and have it look like a piece of crystal. It was just phenomenal to sort of experience that. And each one of these, just to give you some size or scope, this is about a meter. So, this is about a three foot chunk. So they're actually quite big. So, just to reorient us, this is the highway we drove, and then as we got back into this area, this is really more where the tourism picks up. So there's bus tours and things that come down and around the south road, so the southern highway. And so all through here, in Hoffman and Hoff, these were the areas that we stayed. And, you can literally go on day hikes, day climbs. There's an endless array of things. You could spend a month just in any one of these fjords. And the water is all potable. So, everything in Iceland is ready to go because the volcanic rock actually filters it as it melts through. So they say it acts as sort of a carbon filter. So Icelandic water is supposedly a thing.
So you can just drink it.
You can just drink
So
it.
if you're hiking, you just drink the water from the creek and don't think about it.
Basically, that's what we're told. So I made it out all right. So I think it works. And there's not a lot of livestock.
That's what I was thinking, the animals and that kind of thing.
And,
but,
remember, so in the upper northern part is really the only place where there's wild reindeer. Because they're locked in, they're landlocked, so they don't come down into any of this area here.
But elk, caribou, others?
I didn't see any. I know they're there, but it's tough. It looks like Mars. It really does. Other than the edges of Iceland, there's not much in the.
Are there any trees?
No, not really.
Yeah.
There were some versions of an evergreen. I don't know what they were, but they were few and far in between. So this is just another more texture map on one of the centers, and it's healthy and it's free. So this is this felt like a James Bond movie, Dr. Evil's Lair, right? You walk out of the hotel and immediately you're on a glacier, and the glacier's moving, continuously year over year, and you can see sort of a map of its movement. It's pretty cool.
It's got like crevasses and such in those glaciers? Or?
Yeah, each one of these fins are, 20 feet high, 30 feet high.
Okay.
This is massive terrain.
Okay.
Not even Penitente,
Yeah. Some of this stuff I try to get close-ups of, like these are, 4 or 5 feet high.
Mm-hmm.
So, when you're driving back, you want to talk about Dr. Evil's Lair. We decided to take a quick stop at the geothermal plant. So as we were driving back, and this plant actually powers the whole country. 90% of the homes in Iceland are fueled through geothermal means. And the way that they do it is basically by pumping hot water out of the earth, out of the volcanic reservoirs. And as that hot water comes up, they'll pressurize it, create steam, they'll turn a turbine, and that'll give everybody really inexpensive electricity throughout the country. And then the water, as it runs through and out, it'll actually get piped around the country. And, literally guys like Savar, who's got a hot tub in the middle of nowhere, literally just pipes this water into his hot tub because they have to have it run off. So it's sort of like leaving a drip on or a small runoff in your sink in the wintertime so it doesn't freeze and it stays hot. There's always and sort of drips going on the input. So, it's just a massive, modern looking plant, and very impressive stuff. So that's, I highly recommend Iceland. That's what I got for you.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's great.
Very nice.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thanks, Leo.
Makes you want to go, especially if
You
it's
know,
like
how big is
500 bucks around.
what's the capital?
So Reykjavik has like 125, or let me get this right, I'm sorry. 300,000 of the million people in Iceland
Mhm.
is in Reykjavik. I mean, it's an extraordinary number. I got that wrong.
Was that a Danish, was a Danish protector or something? Didn't Denmark own it, or?
Yeah, so it changed hands like 3 times. And when they told the story, it was fascinating because it was claimed and lost a couple times. Then finally, the Icelandic people, refound it. So the Danes, the French, and then, the previous stories of, for instance, the Vikings raiding Iceland, were just, it was hilarious, right? And that was part of how I think Iceland got things like the reindeer, in the northern quadrant. So I wish I would have done a better job of.
I wonder if there
of
were
the
any
history of
indigenous
college.
people, or is this is probably a
No, they-
vacant area that just settled, right? I mean,
Yeah, no, so the people migrated from Europe
yeah.
a couple thousand years ago.
That's a great shot. How
Oh,
many,
it's beautiful.
is that sewn together? You have a number of images that are,
No, it's one image, but it is a fisheye lens.
yeah, it's
So
great.
the ends are bent. But
Didn't they go bankrupt like in the last 10 years or something? There was some big scandal around the economy collapsing or the
Absolutely.
currency collapsing or something.
fascinating stories, yeah. So there were so many jokes that I can't even remember them, but they essentially go along the lines of, Icelandicers are fishermen, not bankers, right? Because what happened was they discovered sort of the modern paradigm of being able to leverage debt. And so, for instance, Savar, our guy here, I think I've got this. I have his website here, so if anybody wants to travel there. So so basically they borrowed all this money, okay? And keep in mind there's a finite number of Icelanders, right? And so they borrowed the money, and then they realized, okay, I'm paying, say, 4% interest on this money. So I'm going to build my cottages, and then I'm going to reloan that money to someone else at 6%, 7%. And so it's the same as our mortgage banking crisis, where essentially we created the synthetic instruments on money that doesn't exist. So what happened was, as the individuals, like Savar, began to really leverage his own debt, the investment bankers did it at an accelerated rate. So it was just, sort of this runaway overvaluation of property and assets that it just didn't exist, the actual asset value, because the value was being set by their own economy. And so what happened was, guys like Savar, this guy, he said, he borrowed this money, he built these cottages, right? And then after the crash, what happened was all those cottages were essentially worth a tenth of what he had borrowed, let alone the original value that he said, the assessed value.
That happened in Ireland, and
Oh.
it's just, everything imploded. It just,
Yeah.
they speculated there were little cottages that would have gone for $200,000 or selling for over $1 million. And then it would bust, and they got overbuilt. All these empty places and high rises empty, and
Well, like Alaska with the pipeline, same
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah,
but it
so-
looks like in terms of energy independence, you can't get quite, anything as good as what they've got, and
Yeah, so they're self-sustained. Their biggest exports are fishing, and now tourism is. I was talking to you, Mary, right? In the Wall Street Journal just had an article maybe a couple months ago about how the number of tourists going to Iceland has just skyrocketed. It's like Iceland's got discovered, so that's their second largest industry. But, it's a third. Fishing, aluminum, and basically Alcoa, we saw an Alcoa plant there. They said, we built one and that's it. They're not gonna do it again, because that plant was actually right across the fjord from where we were climbing. It's actually on my interactive map, you can go and see it. And they built this massive infrastructure to support it. And, you know, the locals are not happy about it, but that's propping up the economy, you know. And thank goodness for them, it's growing, because if you think about it, their actual internal consumption of energy, it's, I mean, they're producing it themselves, and it costs them virtually nothing, right? So it's not like they have to export, or if they have to import any fuel or energy costs, right? So it's really just the economy itself. So it's quite self-sustaining because they don't have energy costs. But they don't have exports other than fish and aluminum, like, you know, like Norway's got, you know, richest country around. because
What
of
else you need? You got heat and you got an aluminum can full of, what else do you need?
That's right, you can eat.
iPhones.
Oh, well, yeah.
Yep.
It's fascinating. My niece went on a vacation to Iceland about a year ago, and she's like 25, and
Oh, yeah.
a lot of her friends have gone there. It's relatively inexpensive. It's kind of exotic in its own way,
Yeah.
and yeah, it's gotten